Okay, welcome to today's session for the Practitioner Research Series, and it's a delight to have Sunny Stout-Rostron with us today, who has been a major contributor to our field and has written a number of books, as well as being a key player in developing coaching within South Africa. So, welcome, Sunny. It's a real pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here and particularly to be with you.
Okay, okay, Sunny, I wonder if you could start just talking a bit about how you came into coaching.
I always tell people coffee is what brought me into coaching. I was doing a lot of work with corporates in the UK at the time, and I kept being asked to have a coffee with the team leaders and the CEO, and there was, nothing, no innuendos about it. It was just coffee that they wanted. And I started noticing that after the conversations we had, they'd start walking away with 6 and 7 figure salaries. And I thought, I'm doing something. I'm
Yeah,
not getting a 6 figure or 7 figure salary. What is going on here? So I thought I better go back and get some psychological training. So that's what I did. And that's really, it was very much at the end of the 90s. It was at the end of the 90s or the beginning of the 90s. I think it was really kind of in the middle of the 90s that we started. It really kind of took off towards the end. And so we didn't even know really to call it coaching, but we were calling it coaching.
yeah,
That's what we were calling it. But nobody had any training. There weren't really any programs we could take. We were training ourselves. We had nothing to hang on to at the time except what we developed.
yeah. Yeah. And so what were the areas you were particularly working in within at that time?
At that time, in terms of the kind of what coaching was for,
Yeah. Yes.
leadership development,
Yeah.
career transitions, transitions out of the corporate world, very often,
Yeah.
thank you, out of the corporate world. And I wasn't being hired by the corporates at the time. I was being hired privately by the people
Right.
who were working in the corporates. So
Okay.
I didn't have to say, no, I can't coach you out of
Yeah.
the company.
Yeah.
But it was really leadership development. It was how they could lead better, developing their self-awareness and emotional intelligence, helping them to understand how better to lead and manage their
Mhm.
people. There was not, there was, there was good leadership and management development
Yeah.
training in the UK. I know because I was part of a company that was doing it at the time. But somehow it wasn't really getting through into the workplace
Yeah.
somehow. So they needed leadership development, management development, emotional awareness building. They needed to understand themselves more. They were stressed. They were burning themselves out. Not much different from today,
Yeah.
except we didn't have it.
Yeah. Okay. And then how about you heavily involved in development of coaching in South Africa, both establishing it, professionalizing it, etc. So I wonder if you can tell me something about that journey.
Yes, and that's when I met you. And it was a very exciting time because I think there were about 9 of us and started working towards a professional doctorate in executive coaching. And that was exciting in itself because there was no program like that in South Africa. I can't remember what there was in the UK, but I don't think there was much. And also, we were part and parcel of mentoring and coaching the master students as well on that program. So for me, it was like I had landed in heaven because all of a sudden here were people talking about what I was doing, but I could hardly even begin to describe what I was doing. And that was the purpose of the doctorate for everyone to work out what is the model that they're working to, what is the strategy they're working to, what are they using, what are the skills that they're using, how are they going about it. So my piece of research was on thousands of hours of going through my coaching sessions with my clients in South Africa and in the UK, and evaluating them, analyzing them to look at what was happening.
Mm.
So that I wanted to understand what was I doing
Yeah.
that was working.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you go about doing that analysis?
Well, it was really hard. It was really hard because I didn't think anybody was going to like what I was doing. I wasn't sure. I didn't know at first, and I remember sitting looking at a piece of paper in when with all the other students, looking at this piece of paper, saying, "We've been told to draw our model. I have, if I try and draw this model, everything but the kitchen sink is in here, so that can't be right. So that can't
Yeah.
be my model." So then that was another part of the journey. What was my model? What was I doing? And in fact, it developed as I
Mm.
did the
Yeah.
research, is how it
Yeah.
happened. And then later, when I went into team coaching and started working with team coaching, I was really lucky. I did some programs. I did one program with Peter Hawkins, well into doing the work in team coaching, but that was very helpful as well. But I actually used, as a case study, I wrote up the work that I did inside an organization, which I wrote a book on, which helped me understand what my team coaching model was. So it was kind of the same thing
Yeah.
that I did.
So I'll come back to that one, but yeah, in terms of the kind of doing the doctorate research, so it was a whole emergent process. So, you
Yeah.
were gradually building it and going back and rebuilding it.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
every time I learned something because we were doing a lot of reading, studying, and then we were also doing our own research into what we were doing because all of us had different underpinnings to our own coaching style, what kind of business training we had, psychological training we had. Um, I was very much immersed in an existential phenomenological way already of working, but I didn't know it was called that
Yeah.
at the time. But I was already deep into that. And of course, other things that came up. And there were no real coaching models to look at. There were psychological models, but a few of them worked really, really well, but most didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. We needed coaching models. And that
Yes.
was for me the whole point of the program, really.
And also, kind of, it was a very important time in South Africa in terms of, newly out of the apartheid era, things were changing a lot. And you were very much involved in trying to promote the whole coaching field in South Africa, in particular, kind of founding Commensa. So, can you explain something around that?
Yeah, I'm going to blame you for Comensa, actually. I think it was you is to blame for this. Because you said to me, and you know, David, if you say something to me, I'll do it. And you said, everybody needs a community project. And Sunny, I think you probably already know what your community project is. And I said, I have an inkling of what you're going to tell me my community project is. Probably we need a professional body for coaching. And yeah, you said that you had a really good idea there. That was exactly what you said. And then I thought, how do I do this?
Yeah.
How am I going to do this?
Yeah.
I Nobody works alone. You
Yes.
can't do things
Yeah.
like that.
Fully
You
agree.
have to collaborate. And for me, and I said it in my talk to Commensa, our 20th anniversary just last week, it's about collaboration.
Yeah.
It's about collaboration. That's Coaching is all about collaboration. What you learn from your clients, what you learn from your coaching, what you learn from your studies. But for me, this was we need to collaborate with everybody in South Africa who called themselves a coach. So I tried to find every single one of them.
Yeah.
There weren't that many. And I invited those who were in the only other body really there was ICF.
Yeah.
And of course, there was the HR body. I don't know if it was called PsyOps at the time, and there was the psychological
Mhm.
body. And so I talked to all of them. The psychologists wanted to keep it all to themselves,
Yeah.
but a lot of them came on board. They didn't like the idea of there being a professional coaching body, but in the end, everybody realized that this was probably a good idea and that we wanted to include everybody's voice to contribute to how we do this. And so what we did is, and I gathered maybe 10 people around me and then 20, and we became a committee. And we started to work out what we needed to do. And what we first needed to do was hear from all the coaches and consultants and psychologists. What did we need our professional body to do if we were going to have one? What was needed? So we asked them. We ran workshops all over the country, which means I traveled a lot. Meant my family wasn't overly happy with me. I traveled a lot. And we had leaders in there like Patty Pampalis Paisley. I can't remember everybody's names now, but Lloyd Chapman, Godfrey O'Flaherty,
Mark Kahn,
and there were the master.
Mark Kahn.
And Mark Kahn
Yeah,
was one
yeah,
of them.
yeah,
Yep, he was a leading one
yeah,
of them. Mark Kahn was one of the psychologists. And we had a lot of the master students. I think
yeah,
all the master students took part, and some of them were really big contributors, which was fabulous. And of course, Roger
yeah,
Maitland was one of
yeah,
those. Yeah.
yeah.
But a few of us only traveled the country, and we ran workshops all over. Helen Adolny took part when we were in Johannesburg. And every time we ran a workshop, we were uncovering what did we need? A constitution, ethics. Eventually, later, we developed the first supervision policy for
Yeah.
coaching. Actually, I was really, really proud of that.
Mm.
And then, of course, a very important cog in our wheel was Nick Wilkins, who helped
Yeah.
with all the writing and editing and things with me. And so we did it together. It was collaborative, and it took 4 years. And you helped me because every time I had a question or didn't know quite what to do, that it was you I would turn to. And we started our work in 2004, the beginning. No, 2002, and finished and launched in 2006. And you very kindly came out to launch it with us, which I was very appreciative of.
I think what's really interesting about that whole process is just how collaborative it was. You were kind of really ensuring all voices were heard and tried to build an association out of those voices. So it's a very coaching approach to actually building an organization.
I never thought of it, but I like that, but you're right. It
Yeah,
was. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, it's continued to this day. It continues to be there. It hasn't come and gone. It's there and it's working still.
And I cannot tell you how excited I am about
Yeah.
that and how thrilled I am about that. And it's had some ups and downs,
Mm.
there are no doubt.
Yeah.
We currently have a board second to none, maybe second to mine, but second to none. Excellent. And we're now talking about how do we branch out into the rest of Africa, bring the rest of Africa in. Yeah.
Mm. Brilliant. Okay, so let's go back to your own kind of research in particular, um, how you began to develop the kind of team coaching stuff that you mentioned before. And I was particularly kind of the book you did, Transformational Coaching to Lead Culturally Diverse Teams, which was kind of a unique and original concept. So can you tell us a bit about the book, and then we can look in detail at how you went about creating it?
Yeah. What was unique or different about it?
Well,
Was
I
it
think
the,
what you were doing was actually a number of things. One, you're actually not just, you were looking at the kind of literature there, but then you're actually saying, there's other ways of doing this. Particularly, you talk about the use of Ubuntu as a kind of philosophical position. So it was quite unlike anything else that was in that kind of emergent literature at that time. So you're actually saying, this has to really reflect kind of philosophical position, which is not a standard Western orientation.
yes, yes, that's true. And that's the influence that living in Africa has had on me. And that was 28 years worth of my life spent
Yeah,
in Africa. And I'm now not in South Africa anymore. I'm in Mauritius, but it's East Africa. So I'm still
yeah,
here.
yeah,
And it's pretty exciting.
yeah,
And also, so the question really is
yeah,
how did we go about it?
yeah.
So what I did, I always bring in an internal facilitator
Mhm.
of the business that I'm working in. And by bringing in an internal facilitator, that is your person who gets you all the people that you need to speak to, work with, etc., to work with the teams you're working with, to deal with the questions you have, to give permission or not to various things. And it means you are working in the system. And that's what's the most important thing is to be working in the system. And I've learned that over the years that you work in the system, even though you have the outside view.
Yeah.
You're working in the system. And so I invited someone who's become one of my business partners now, um, Deborah Williams, who was at a Metropolitan, and we worked together actually for 5 years. And at the time, I was doing Peter Hawkins' program. So I was bringing in other literature that I had not yet read. And I was bringing in the work because it was very experiential. I was bringing in the work and the learning I was getting from that. And so the way we started was to start with the individual leaders that needed help with their different divisions. And the outcome really that was wanted was cultural transformation
Yeah.
and and leadership development. Those were really the key things. And of course, they had a massively important business because they were working alongside government with a medical scheme.
Yeah.
So, but they weren't government. So it was a very complex um, program. It was a very complex program to put together and also to run. So what we did is we worked with the leaders. I had several coaches working with me. We worked with the leaders and we ran workshops in leadership development for ostensibly for the leaders. But in the end, we worked on many different things. We worked on understanding systems and business processes and how they could coach and mentor their people, how what they needed to do to understand how were they treating people,
Right.
how were they bringing people's voices in to the room in terms of the vision, etc. There's a lot of stuff we were working on. It was massive. I mean, I had no idea it was going to be so massive. And yet we just went very slowly, but very quickly. We had team coaching sessions with each team once a month. And that team, I tell you, this is what it's like in corporates. You know, one
Yeah.
person leaves one month, another comes
Yeah.
in, two people leave, two people come in. You're constantly
Yeah.
re bonding, etc. And out of it, I started to realize that what we were doing was different. So I started to write it down. And we did something every month. We were working with the coaching and with the team coaching, and then we melded them together so that they were in complete alignment with what we were doing. And in the meantime, there was a lot of things happening in the country, and there were a lot of things happening in this particular business, and it was difficult.
Yeah.
And one of the most eye-opening things, if I can say this, I won't mention any names, the most eye-opening things I learned about the importance of coaching in terms of leadership development is I work very much with the thinking environment. I've been working
Yeah.
with Nancy Klein for 15 years, and the
Yeah.
thinking environment influenced everything that we did, everything. It was an underpinning for everything that we did and how we worked. And I was coaching and teaching people the thinking environment to run their meetings, to do their dialogues, their conflict resolution, all of that. So I learned as we always worked in rounds to start with, and we came round and we went very deep in our rounds. And one of the questions I'd asked that day was, what is something in here amongst us 26 or 7 people that nobody here knows about you, even though you've worked together for 10 years? And this one man spoke up to tell them something that happened to him 6 years ago that they knew about the accident, but they didn't know about the outcomes of the
Right.
accident. And he had a prosthetic leg,
Mm.
and they didn't know that.
Right.
And it was the silence in the room and the sadness in the room that he worked with these people and they didn't know that
Yeah.
about him was palpable.
Mm.
And so we talked about it. You know, what did that mean? So lots and lots of those kinds of things came out because we were constantly deepening our working relationships, our
Yeah.
personal relationships.
Yeah.
Have I answered the question?
You've given us a really clear idea of how practice, reflection on practice, reflection on practice, going backs and forwards has gradually led you to a positioning,
Yeah.
which kind of formed the kind of the basis for the research to create the book. So you've got a real sense of the way you can use practice to gradually build the ideas to actually create the research for the book. Um,
Yeah.
the thing I was particularly interested is the cultural diversity thing, because you've definitely in the book kind of developed the idea of Ubuntu as one of the frameworks, and the idea that actually one of the differences in working where you are is the importance of the collective, not just the individual. So perhaps you could expand on that a bit.
So Ubuntu was obviously very much a new concept to me, but it was just called something different the way I grew up because I
Yeah.
grew up with Native Americans,
Yes.
and we have Native American in my family.
Mm.
And so our dinner table was around to
Yeah.
start with,
Right.
from the youngest to the oldest, and everybody spoke because my mother was a writer.
Yeah.
And so she wanted to know names for her characters and things, but she
Right.
first wanted to know how was our day.
Yeah.
So that's where I learned about rounds. That's something
Mm.
you do in an African culture,
Yeah.
is each voice is heard. I was working with a thinking environment. Every
Mm.
voice must be heard once before any voice is heard twice.
Yeah.
So I had grown up with quite a few traditions, funnily enough, for a California girl,
Yeah.
um, that really resonated with Africa.
Yes.
And so I really settled, it took a while, but I settled really happily into working in Africa
Mm.
because it really suited
Yes.
how I thought and my values. So, what was the question? Sorry, I get
Looking
started
at how,
talking.
how the kind of the concept of working in culturally
Right.
diverse way within teams, and the beginning of that, bringing in the philosophy of Ubuntu, which you said kind of relates to actual Native American philosophy as well.
It happened because I wrote a couple books based on my doctorate and
Yeah.
based on my practice.
Mm.
And in those books, in each business coaching, wisdom, and practice, which wrote for South
Yeah.
Africans asked me what I write a book for them, and I did.
Yeah.
And then Business Coaching International, which expanded and rewrote it and expanded it to include what was happening in the rest of the
Yeah.
world with coaching. And in every book since, I've always written about ethics and cultural diversity.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think the word difference is better than diversity, but people use diversity, so that's the term
Yeah.
that gets used because it's not just about diversity. We're different in everything from
Yeah.
every other human being. It doesn't matter what color we are, what language we speak, what education we have. Everything about us is different from every other person in the world. But here in South Africa, it hits you in the face every single second of your day.
Yes.
And it's amazing. And the collaboration and the way people talk to you and how they greet you and how they treat you is extraordinary. And particularly with the reputation some people have of South Africa,
Yeah.
the people here work together. And one of the things with Ubuntu, people always wonder why South African and African people speak very loudly.
Mm.
And that's because you don't want people to think you're telling secrets. And so you speak openly. So I learned a lot
Mm.
by living here and living in Africa. And so I brought that came into my practice because
Yeah.
I was coaching African people and South African people. And so I brought it into my work first in my writing and in my workshops and then into my practice. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the best way to explain
Yeah.
it.
Fascinating. I'm kind of interested in sort of the Native American kind of background. A book I was reading recently by someone, Kathy Epsilon, who was native Canadian. And, she went through that whole period, colonial period, where as a child she was taken out of her culture and stuck in a residential school, not allowed to speak her own language, taught to be Western
Mhm.
Christian, etc., etc. And therefore I had to go back and relearn her culture.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
kind of that was very much, kind of a process of actually reconnecting with this, with the native culture and
Yeah.
the principles and values there. And of
Yes.
course, a similar thing happened in America with kind of the residential, the schools, the attempt to actually take away a
Mhm.
culture, and people had to
Yeah.
work to sort of keep it, but also for
Yeah.
many
Get back.
relearn it.
Quite interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's very interesting. Sorry, I just want to make sure that you can see me if I'm close enough because I
yes,
realize I haven't blurred my background. Is that okay?
it's fine.
Um, well, it's very interesting. My family's my family home, we moved from, well, my parents, I had already left the coop. My parents bought a cabin up in uh, uh, the Sierra Nevadas in Native American territory, and the cabin was on what was originally Miwok territory, and it was desanctified, etc. And I won't tell the story here, but there are some really lovely stories because of where the cabin is
Yes,
built was
yeah,
right where the graveyard was. So
yes,
we had a few interesting ghosts.
yeah,
So let's put it that
yeah,
way.
yeah,
But so they then my parents retired up into what was originally Native American territory, and my one of my sisters um, worked for 4 years for no money and living in the snow up there in this cabin in Tuolumne, which was
yeah,
another Indian
yeah,
tribe up there. And she worked in the school for Tuolumne, and she wanted to teach in that school because it's where the poor were, and some
yeah,
of them were Native American, some weren't. Um, and so she worked for 4 years until a governing body position came available, and then she could teach there. And she used to go haul kids out of their homes and bring them to school.
yeah,
So it's really neat. It's near and dear to my heart, Native
yeah,
American territory, Native American culture. But that's also why I had such an affinity with
yes,
Africa.
yeah, great. Okay. Now, apart from the kind of transformating the culturally diverse teams book, as you have said, you've written quite a few others. Um, one I read relatively recently was the one where you're actually looking at approaches to leadership, and that was a very practical book looking at leadership. Can you tell us a bit about that one?
Is that the leadership coaching
Yeah.
purpose? Oh,
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
the everything you wanted to know
Yes.
about leading, managing people. That one.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're afraid to ask. Yeah.
Afraid to ask. Yeah. Which is an intriguing
So,
title in itself.
thanks to Woody Allen. Very near to a title of his film, one of
Yeah.
his films.
Yeah.
So, so the question is, how come I
How
wrote
did
that?
that come about? But in a sense, questions afraid to ask. How did you kind of develop the ideas for that book?
Completely from my coaching,
Yeah.
working with leaders and managers. Absolutely, completely. And also, I had designed and run a lot of leadership and management development programs in the UK
Right.
because I lived 25 years between the UK and then
Yeah.
sometime in France. Um, and so I was always interested in really the education of leaders and managers, both practically just in training and also academically.
Yeah.
So working with leaders and managers, you learn a lot. You learn a lot about what they don't know and what they need to know, and you have to help coach them into what they don't know. You have to find training programs for them, developmental programs
Yeah.
for them if there isn't one, because coaching isn't about teaching them. So, and then you're coaching them when they come back as to how they can manage differently. It all came out of my practice,
Mm.
all of it. Yeah.
On the basis of that, what would you say to other practitioners in terms of really using their practice to develop research and ideas?
Write it down
Mhm.
and write it down as you go. Write
Yeah.
it down what you learned, write down what you did, keep track of what you did. Obviously, the programs you run or the coaching you do now with AI, you can keep a transcript of things or have a summary of things. But I hadn't written it down. And so I really only I didn't want to go back and look through the notes of my coaching clients,
Yeah.
but I did want to do a review with them. So I did speak to quite a few of my clients. I didn't do interviews, but I spoke to them about what they learned about leadership and management. And so that also was very helpful. Write it down, record what you can, and then produce it in some way, use it, create it, write a blog, put it on your website, write a book with somebody. I'm right now speaking to someone about writing another book together, Wendy and Smith, about ethics, leadership ethics. It's about leadership. So write it down, record it, believe in what you do, look at what works, look at what doesn't work. And I can't even believe it to this day how much sometimes I don't quite trust my voice. So I ask 10 people to read my books
Yeah.
and make sure they tell me all the things that are good, bad, and ugly in there, or what needs to change or what not, etc. Which you should do anyway. That's
Yes.
called collaboration.
Yeah.
So write it down, record it, and collaborate with others.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
what you do. Yeah, definitely.
Essential points there, make sure you collaborate, make sure you keep a record, make sure you write down, make sure you reflect on what you're doing, and always,
Yeah.
always think about innovation of your practice.
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah.
Given your wide experience in this field,
Okay.
what do you see as the issues for coaching and coaching psychology going forward?
Well, of course, what's on everybody's mind, and everybody's going to say number one is AI. And in fact, I had a big talk, a little piece in my talk to Comensa about AI because people are afraid of it. And
Yeah.
that's something we have to take into account. And if you don't take it into account, you're going to be behind the game.
Yeah.
So the first thing about artificial intelligence is it's going to change. And there's no use worrying about who's going to take over what,
Yeah.
because we need to work together. Human beings, we need to have human being coaches. Human beings build relationships, emotional intelligence, etc. To do coaching without human beings, I think eventually as the only thing I think would be um, I don't know what the word is, but it would be drastic.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't help people because people need people and people resonate with people. So we need human being coaches, but we also need artificial intelligence. And because the artificial intelligence comes up with thoughts that maybe we don't think as a human being. But the other thing that is important with AI, you can scale it. You can scale things. You can run a program and have 30 people in your program, and you can have a human being coach and an AI coach.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something I see happening, and that's something I'm thinking about. I think that's something that's possible. I have an AI coach for Italian and one for French. Even though I speak fluent French and I speak pretty good Italian, and I have a human being coach as well, a tutor for each, because I need both.
Yeah.
I need both. And the thing about AI that has to develop is it's all very positive. It tells you how wonderful you are. Well, you're not always wonderful. So you do need to have a little bit of critical
Yeah.
thinking in there. So AI is one thing, but I think we need to work together with AI. I really feel that. And so you're wanting to know where are we going to go going
Yeah.
forward? I don't have a crystal ball,
No.
but I do know that already there are current trends in coaching and mentoring. One, mentoring has to be bigger alongside coaching. It has to be the same size. It has to be equal. We have to have both coaching and mentoring, developing people in organizations, in education, in schools. The thing I think that has to happen is I think we need to start at grade 0 in school, grade 1, with coaching and mentoring. Maybe in kindergarten, maybe in grade 1. I think we need to bring coaching and mentoring into the schools from the very beginning. And I would really like to see that happen. I, I have an idea, but I don't know how it could happen. I'm getting up there in years, so I have to think about how many years I have to do what. But I really think coaching and mentoring now needs to come into the schools. So yes, we have tutors, but tutors need to be coaches, actually, not telling kids what to do. They need to help children learn how to learn. I have one lovely young woman who is the daughter of one of my fellow business partners and coaches, who is coaching my grandson who is in his matric, and it's fabulous. And I'm also helping her with her coaching. And so we need coaching and mentoring in schools. And the other thing, we need coaching and mentoring alongside coaching because mentoring is an African thing. We need it in Africa. Telling stories and learning from your elders is really key and really important. It's the reason I don't feel that I have to stop working.
Yeah.
living in Africa.
Yeah.
I can get to 100 and I can still work because I will be respected as an elder. Well, I
Yeah.
hope be
Yes.
respected as an
Yeah.
elder. And so that's what I think. Coaching and mentoring should be in schools. Coaching and mentoring should be equal, and there should be mentoring development programs as much as coaching.
Yeah.
And everyone in their life should have at least 12 mentors throughout their life. I couldn't have done what I've done in the last few years, David, somehow without you, although you would disagree with that. Just knowing you were there was good. And so I
Thank you
thank
for
you
that.
for that.
Yeah.
Um,
You
I
talk
think that's
about
what I
kind of the importance of stories, and certainly when I worked with the wonderful Ellen Kasawa in South Africa, um, a woman who kind of went through the whole apartheid period, was in prison, etc., etc., but actually had a real sense that the key to the future of South Africa was learning from each other. And she made a key point about the stories we're able to tell each other and how, in listening to each other's stories, we can really learn from each other. And it seems so important within a kind of the tradition everywhere that we really pay attention to our people's stories.
It is. Stories are everything.
Yeah.
And life is built on relationships.
Mm,
Coaching is relational, mentoring is relational. Our families are everything in our life, our
mm,
work, our faith groups, whatever. Everything is built on relationships, and that's built on people's stories.
mm.
That's what we share with each other. So we need to bring it in professionally to help people learn from it. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sunny. It's been a delight listening to you. And thank you very much for all you've done for our profession.
Thank you. I feel very honored. Thank you very much. It's lovely to work with you. Bye.
Bye.